Well, it's been a couple of days, and we're back talking more about Umaru, like I said we would. On the previous episode, we talked about Umaru, Taihei, and two of her friends, and how loneliness defines their characters, but for this one, we're going to go into a deeper dive involving those characters, as well as two other characters who I left out because of time restraints. So yeah, let's just get right back into it, and spoilers, I guess, for an anime that is no longer airing and a manga that has since finished. Now, in the previous episode, we mostly talked about the events that happened in season 1 of the show, because I guarantee you most anyone who watched Himoto Umaru-chan did not know it had a second season. Probably because the second season is called Himoto Umaru-chan R, which no one understands why it's called that. I don't want to look it up. I just know they did it to be complicated and annoy the shit out of me. Now, I ended the last video by saying that there were a few characters I wanted to talk about at the beginning of this one, so I'm just going to get right into that. And those two characters being Kanao and Hikari. First, let's just talk about Kanao, because there's literally nothing to her character other than the fact that she's a much worse Ebina. That may sound like an exaggeration, but I'm not joking about this. Her literal one defining character trait in the entire series is that she's also got the hots for Taihei. The problem is she just can't seem to say anything and always chickens out at the last second. She even gets a full 2 weeks alone with the guy and doesn't do anything with it except watch him through a pair of binoculars. That is just sad. Now, who exactly is Kanao? Well, she was Taihei's high school friend and then grew up to become his boss at the company that he works at. So essentially, she is nobody important in the series. I joke. Kanao is actually supposed to be the opposite end of Umaru and Taihei's relationship with her own sister. She's supposed to be the negative side as to what Taihei goes through. Much like Taihei, she's also looking after her little sister, but she's also more important at her company and thus has to work late more often and doesn't get a lot more time with her sister. Add to that the fact that Kanao can't cook, she also disciplines her sister a lot and generally isn't there for her. Kanao is just basically a giant mess. She even spends Christmas Eve alone every year with wine and movies and doesn't bother inviting her own sister to join her, which Hikari is very aware of. Yeah, that one example should be enough to let you know that Kanao spends a lot of her time by herself. That and Taihei is also mentioning that she got her position at a young age, so she has a lot of pressure put on her. It seems that Kanao's only social life happens to be her employees and her little sister, both of which she is not doing a really good job at maintaining. So that's why she often spends a lot of her free time by herself. She doesn't bother asking other people to join her because she knows she's not good at it. But how does all this affect Hikari, her younger sister? Well, as we see in the series itself, Hikari is not doing much better. Hikari spends so much free time by herself that she generally just stares up at the night sky all night and just remembers the constellations that Taihei taught her. She doesn't have anybody else in her life, so she just spins around on a globe and stuffs her face with bread. In fact, that one moment of Taihei teaching her the constellations affected her so much because it was the only time in her life she felt she had a real older sibling. So she attached herself to Taihei. Emotionally, I mean, not physically. Actually, maybe a little physically. It even gets to the point that she actively looked for Taihei just so she could spend nights and have dinner with him, despite the fact that Umaru clearly doesn't want her around at all. Yeah, Umaru kind of shows another side of her loneliness through her interactions with Hikari, that being one of possessiveness. This is something not a lot of people talk about with introverts, but essentially, they're alone a lot of the time because they don't know how to interact with people. So when they have somebody they find loyalty towards and start to get comfortable around, they get very possessive about how much that other person spends time with someone other than themselves. Or if you want to get technical in the case of the show, that would be if Taihei stopped spending so much time with Umaru because he was looking out for Hikari, Umaru would basically say, "No. That's my big brother." No, I am not doing the voice again. The last time hurt my throat. This is brought up again in another episode when a casual mentioning of Taihei's dating life is brought up and Umaru gets a little jealous over the idea that Taihei could be seeing somebody else. I don't want to look deeper into the implications behind this because it might lead to something disgusting or disturbing for YouTube, so we're just gonna say it's a wholesome sibling moment and it has nothing to do with incest. Oh wait, fuck! Kyrie! Yeah, we briefly mentioned her in the last one because I didn't have a lot to say. But we have a lot more to say now because Season 2 gives us so much more information about her. We also learn about Kyrie's ambition to become a storybook author, writing stories about little Umaru's adventures that didn't actually happen, but happened in her mind. Writing is hard, okay? I don't know how to explain the process of writing when I am writing this. The point is, she wants to make storybooks and she's nervous about how people will respond to that statement. Okay? There. But the biggest thing that happens with Kyrie in this season is that she actually becomes more supportive of Ebina's goal to get together with Taihei, which is a very admirable thing for someone who we've seen be very distant and cold to other people. She's openly supportive not because she generally thinks they'll be a good couple, but because she knows it will make Ebina happy and she wants to see her friend, well, be happy for once. While this leads to many fuck-ups and mistakes from Ebina trying to get together with Taihei, it does lead to a sweet moment of the two of them bonding from Ebina talking about her brother. We don't need to talk about Sylphie because we got all the confirmation in this season about the stuff I talked about last time. Now we finally talk about the girl herself, Umaru. And as I mentioned a little bit ago, she is very possessive in this season. But while the examples I mentioned before were done out of jealousy, we actually learn a lot of her possessiveness mainly just come from the fact that she doesn't want to be without her brother. Over the course of the last season into this one, she has grown a lot more accustomed to being with Taihei to the point that she can't stand the idea of him being gone for longer than the time he normally is gone. One of the biggest examples of this is when Taihei mentions that he's going to be out of town for 2 weeks. He builds it up at first by just saying he's going to be gone for a while, and Umaru can't handle that. She breaks down into tears, crying, like the idea she's gonna be alone for a long time. Even during that 2 weeks where she seems mostly fine, when she's finally alone with her brother after letting that all sink in, she breaks down again. She couldn't handle it. She can't stand the idea that her brother isn't always going to be there for her. I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself a lot from the previous video, but it really does show more in this second season than it did in the first one, just how dependent Umaru is on Taihei. She can't function without another person in her life. She needs distractions, which is why she's been more open lately into expanding her friend group, hanging out with Ebina, Sylphie, and Kyrie all at the same time. Because she knows that if she spends too much time alone, she's just going to get sad and not know how to handle it. She's going to be sitting there by herself, playing with her hamsters, thinking everything's alright, everything's gonna be good, and then it will hit her. Umaru may be living 3 separate identities all at the same time, but I think she's using this as a way to constantly make sure there's someone in her life, so that she'll never be alone, which might actually explain why she can never reveal her true self to anybody else other than her big brother. Because when they find out, it's not really going to change anything except limit the amount of socialization she's actually going to get. This series is downright sad and depressing even if you look at it through an analytical level. It's not designed to be a cheer-up anime despite it being a slice-of-life one. Looking at it through a deeper lens lets you know that this is an anime all about being alone and choosing how to handle it. And that covers both seasons of Himota Umaru-chan. Now, I know there's a manga, so it has a lot more to offer, and I would do that, but yeah, I'm not gonna do that right now. You know what? Let's make a deal. If we can get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll do Umaru Part 3 covering the entire manga. How's that sound? Fair? Yeah, I say that's fair. Why am I going for such a high number? Because I have a lot of other ideas I want to do before then. I don't want to immediately just jump back into Umaru. I want to try some other stuff for a little bit. Come on, give me a break. Speaking of which, what am I gonna do for the next one? I mean, I could just review another anime or a movie, but I'm getting kind of tired of that. Well, let's see what's on the game cabinet.